Captain Tejo sat in the command chair. Of the morning light, his fingers drumming against the armrest. The Valorian scout ship was small, built for speed and stealth, not comfort. He had been on patrol for 3 weeks now, mapping the outer edges of the quarantine zone. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. The quarantine zone surrounded the Sol system. Every child in the galaxy learned about it in school. Humans had lived there once, 300 years ago. They had been primitive, violent and foolish. They destroyed themselves with nuclear weapons and poisoned their own planet. The Galactic Assembly had marked the system as forbidden territory. No one was allowed to enter. It was supposed to be a reminder of what happened when a species chose war over wisdom. Tejo never thought much about humans. They were just another dead civilization, a sad story from the past. The galaxy had moved on. 7 great species now ruled the stars together in peace. The wars were over. Everyone was safe, but today something was different. Captain, I'm picking up strange readings, his navigator said, her voice uncertain. Energy signatures coming from inside the quarantine zone. Tejo sat up straight. That's impossible. Nothing should be active there. I know, sir, but the readings are clear. Multiple sources. They're coming from the outer planets. He stared at the display screen. The readings were faint but steady. Someone or something was using power in the dead system. It could be a malfunction in their sensors. It could be natural phenomena. Or it could be something else. Tejo knew the rules. The quarantine zone was off limits. If he reported this, the assembly would send a committee. They would debate for months. By then, whatever was making those signals might be gone. But if he went in himself and found nothing, he would look like a fool. If he went in and found something dangerous, he could start a panic. He made his decision. Set course for the outer Sol system. Keep our stealth systems active. We're going to take a look. The morning light slipped past the quarantine boundary like a shadow. Tejo felt his heart beating faster. He was breaking protocol, but his curiosity was stronger than his fear. The ship moved deeper into the system, past the frozen outer planets, past the gas giants. The energy readings grew stronger. Captain, I'm detecting structures on Titan. That's Saturn's moon, the navigator said. They're artificial ships, maybe stations. Tejo's blood ran cold. How many? Dozens, maybe hundreds, and they're not old ruins. These readings show active power systems. Take us closer. Slowly. As they approached Titan's orbit, Tejo saw them. Spacecraft, sleek and dark, built-in designs he had never seen before. They hung in space around the moon like a steel web. Weapons bristled from their hulls. These were warships built for combat. Suddenly, alarms screamed throughout the morning light. We've been locked onto multiple targeting systems, the navigator shouted. Drop stealth broadcast. Peaceful intent, Tejo ordered. All channels. The view screen flickered. Face appeared, a human face. Tejo had only seen humans in history books, but he recognized the features. Dark eyes, black hair, and an expression of cold calculation. She wore a military uniform, black and gray, with symbols he didn't recognize. Unknown vessel. This is Commander Yuna of the Titan Defense Fleet, the woman said. Her voice was calm and hard. You have entered restricted space. State your purpose or be destroyed. Tejo's mouth went dry. Defense fleet. Humans were supposed to be extinct. Commander, I am Captain Tejo of the Valorian scout ship Morning Light. I thought your people were gone. Records say humanity destroyed itself 300 years ago. Yuna's expression didn't change. Your records are incomplete. We survived. Lower your shields and prepare to be boarded. If you resist, we will fire. Tejo had no choice. The human ships surrounded him. There were dozens of them, and his scout ship had no weapons worth mentioning. Complying with your request, Commander. 20 minutes later, Tejo sat in a bare metal room aboard a human vessel. Walls were gray and cold. Everything felt different from the ships he knew. There was no elegance here, no art. This was a ship built for war, nothing more. Commander Yuna entered the room. She sat across from him, her hands folded on the table between them. 2 armed soldiers stood by the door. You're the first outsider to find us in 300 years, Yuna said. I need to know what you're going to do with this information. Tejo shook his head, still trying to process everything. I don't understand. How did you survive? The radiation alone should have killed everyone on Earth. Earth is still poisoned, Yuna said quietly. But our ancestors were smarter than your history books claim. When they saw the war coming, some of them ran. They took everything they could carry and fled to the outer planets, to the moons and asteroids. They built habitats in the ice and rock. They survived in the darkness while Earth burned below them. But why stay hidden? The assembly would have helped you rebuild. Yuna laughed, but there was no humor in it. Would they? We monitored your transmissions. We learned your languages. We heard what the galaxy thought of us: primitive, violent, self-destructive, a cautionary tale for young students. Why would we reveal ourselves to people who had already decided we weren't worth saving? Tejo felt shame burn in his chest. She was right. Humanity was a joke in the assembly, a warning about the dangers of barbarism. What have you been doing all this time? Watching, learning, building, Yuna said. She stood and walked to a wall panel. It lit up, showing images of spacecraft, weapons, factories. We studied every species in the galaxy. We learned from your successes and your failures. We developed our own technology, our own way of fighting. We're not like you, Captain. We don't have your fancy energy shields or your quantum computers. We had to be smarter, tougher, more creative. You've been preparing for war, Tejo said softly. We've been preparing to survive, Yuna corrected him. The galaxy forgot about us. We made sure we would never forget about the galaxy. Tejo looked at her, at the determination in her eyes. What happens to me now? Yuna sat down again. That depends. You seem like an honest person, Captain. I'm going to take a chance on you. I'm going to show you something, and then I'm going to let you go. You can tell the assembly about us, or not. That's your choice. She led him through the ship to an observation deck. Through the windows, Tejo saw something that took his breath away. Massive shipyards floated in space. Around Titan, hundreds of vessels in various stages of construction. Factories churning out weapons and armor, training grounds where human soldiers practiced in zero gravity. We number in the millions now, Yuna said, spread across the Sol system. We're not the same humans who destroyed Earth, we're their children and we learn from their mistakes. We're stronger now, smarter, and we're ready. Ready for what? Tejo asked. Yuna turned to look at him. For whatever comes next. The galaxy thinks we're a lost tale, a dead civilization. Maybe it's better that way, but if the day comes when the galaxy needs us, we'll be here. We didn't survive 300 years in the dark just to die quietly. Tejo returned to the morning light with his head spinning. As his ship departed Titan's orbit, he looked back at the human fleet. They were ghosts, living in the ruins of their old empire, preparing for a future no one else could see. He had a choice to make: tell the assembly and turn humanity into a political crisis, or keep silent and trust that Yuna's people meant no harm. Either way, Tejo knew one thing for certain: the galaxy had counted mankind as a lost tale. They were wrong. The warning came 3 months after Tejo's discovery. Admiral Hyan stood in the command center, buried deep beneath Titan's frozen surface, watching the emergency broadcast from the galactic assembly. His face remained calm, but his hands gripped the railing in front of him. "This is High Chancellor Vexter of the Galactic Assembly," the alien's voice crackled through the speakers. "We are issuing a galaxy-wide alert. An unknown hostile force has appeared at the outer rim. Multiple star systems have gone dark. We are mobilizing all defense fleets. All member worlds must contribute vessels immediately." The broadcast ended. The room fell silent except for the hum of computers. "Pull up all available data," Hyan ordered. "I want to know what we're dealing with." His intelligence officer, a young man named Junho, worked quickly at his console. "Sir, our observation posts have been tracking unusual activity at the rim for weeks. We didn't know what it was. The assembly just had their first contact." "Show me." The main display lit up with intercepted transmissions and sensor data. Hyan watched as entire planets disappeared from the galactic network. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Something was moving through the outer systems, consuming everything in its path. "The assembly archives call them the Devourers," Junho said quietly. "Ancient machine intelligence. They were defeated 10,000 years ago and went dormant. Looks like they just woke up." Hyan had read about the Devourers in the old human databases before Earth fell. Human scientists had studied every galactic threat they could find. The Devourers were nightmare fuel, self-replicating war machines that converted entire planets into more weapons. They didn't negotiate. They didn't stop. They just consumed. "How is the assembly responding?" Hyan asked. "They're gathering their fleets at the Kelver system. 3,000 ships from all 7 member worlds. They're confident their technology can stop the threat." Hyan snorted. "Of course they are. They haven't fought a real war in centuries. They've forgotten what it means." "Should we offer assistance, sir?" "No. Not yet. They wouldn't accept it anyway. Monitor the situation. I want every scrap of data from that battle." 2 weeks later, the Battle of Kelver began. Hyan watched through stealth drones. Humanity had positioned throughout the galaxy. The assembly fleet was impressive. Gleaming vessels with energy shields and particle beam weapons, they moved in perfect formation, confident in their superiority. The Devourers came from the dark spaces between stars. Their ships were massive, black and angular, covered in weapons that looked like they had grown rather than been built. There were hundreds of them and more kept appearing. The assembly fleet opened fire first. Brilliant beams of energy lanced across space, striking the Devourer ships. The weapons should have torn through armor like paper. Instead, the Devourer hulls shimmered and absorbed the energy. Their armor adapted in real time, becoming resistant to whatever hit it. By all the stars, Junho whispered as they watched, the energy weapons aren't working. The Devourers returned fire. Their weapons were different, using kinetic projectiles and exotic matter assembly. Shields designed to stop energy weapons failed against solid mass moving at incredible speeds. Ships were torn apart, formations broke. Panic spread through the assembly fleet. In less than an hour, the assembly lost 800 ships. The rest retreated in chaos. Hyun turned away from the display, his jaw tight. Analysis: why did they fail? Junho pulled up battle data on his screen. The Devourers have adaptive armor. Every time they're hit with an energy weapon, they adjust. By the end of the battle, the assembly's weapons were nearly useless. But there's something else, sir. Watch this section. The display showed a close-up of a Devourer ship. It fired its weapons in a sustained barrage, then went quiet for exactly 3 seconds before firing again. They have to recharge, Junho said. It's brief, but it's there. That's when they're vulnerable. Hyun nodded slowly. The assembly won't see it, they'll just see overwhelming force and give up. But we see it. The Devourers are powerful, but they're not invincible. What do we do, sir? We prepare quietly. And we wait. Back on the Morning Light, Taeho was racing toward the assembly homeworld. He had kept humanity's secret for 3 months. But now everything had changed. The galaxy was facing extinction. His conscience wouldn't let him stay silent. He requested an emergency session with the Council of Ascended Worlds. They granted it, probably out of curiosity more than respect. Taeho stood in the great assembly hall, surrounded by representatives from 7 species. They looked down at him from their elevated seats like judges examining an insect. Captain Taeho, High Chancellor Vexter said, you requested this audience. Speak. Honored Council, I have information that could help in the war against the Devourers. 3 months ago, I discovered something. Inside the Sol quarantine zone, humanity survived. They've been rebuilding in secret for 300 years. They have ships, weapons, and military experience. I believe they can help us. The chamber erupted in laughter. Taeho felt his face burn with shame. Captain, this is a waste of our time. One of the council members said, still chuckling. Even if humans somehow survived, and we doubt your claim, they would be primitive and useless. We need advanced technology, not barbaric throwbacks. But their weapons might work differently, Taeho insisted. They could. Enough, Vexter interrupted. We appreciate your imagination, Captain, but we face a real crisis. We need real solutions, not fairy tales about extinct primitives. This session is over. Taeho left the chamber feeling hollow. He had tried, he had failed. The assembly would face the Devourers alone, and they would lose. Back in the Sol system, Commander Yuna stood in Admiral Hyun's command center, watching the same conclusion reach the assembly leadership. They were pulling back consolidating their forces, preparing defensive positions around their core worlds. They're going to lose, she said. Flatly, they're fighting the wrong war. Yes, Hyan agreed. The Devourers adapt to energy weapons. The assembly relies on energy weapons. It's simple mathematics. We should help them. They don't want our help. Captain Tejo tried to tell them about us. They laughed at him. Yuna's eyes hardened. Then we helped them anyway. Not because they deserve it, because it's the right thing to do. We didn't survive 300 years just to watch the galaxy burn. Hyan studied her for a long moment. You understand what you're asking? If we reveal ourselves, everything changes. We can't go back to hiding. I understand, but what's the point of surviving if we lose our humanity in the process? Our ancestors destroyed Earth because they forgot how to work together, how to help each other. We can't make the same mistake. Hyan smiled, a rare expression on his weathered face. I was hoping you'd say that. I've already started drafting orders. We'll begin operations in 72 hours. What's the plan? We do what we do best. We fight dirty. We hit them where they don't expect it. When they don't expect it, we show the Devourers that humanity doesn't fight fair, and we don't give up. Across the Sol system, human military bases went a full alert, shipyards that had been building in secret for centuries kicked into overdrive. Soldiers who had trained their entire lives for a war that might never come prepared to launch. Commander Solomon received her orders and began selecting her best stealth ship captains. Pilot Hana checked her fighter for the 100th time, making sure everything was perfect. In laboratories on Europa, scientist Murai studied every scrap of data from the Battle of Kelver. She worked without sleep, driven by a terrible idea forming in her mind. The Devourers were machines. Machines had code. Code could be hacked. The galaxy counted mankind as a lost tale, a dead civilization that destroyed itself through its own violence. They were about to learn the truth. Humanity had learned from its mistakes. They had spent 3 centuries becoming the warriors the galaxy would need. The ghosts were about to enter the war, and nothing would be the same. Commander Solomon watched the Devourer harvest her ship through her view screen. The massive vessel hung in space above a dying planet, its collection beams sucking up raw materials, metal, minerals, organic matter. Everything went into its conversion chambers. In a few hours, that planet would be nothing but a barren rock, and the Devourers would have more ships, more weapons, more of everything. How many escorts? Soman asked quietly. 4 destroyer-class vessels, her sensor officer replied. Standard patrol configuration. They're not expecting trouble this deep in occupied space. Soman smiled without humor. Her stealth frigate, the Silent Blade, floated in the shadow of an asteroid, completely invisible to Devourer sensors. 3 other human ships waited nearby, equally hidden. They had spent 2 weeks sneaking past Devourer patrol lines, using slow approaches and cold running to avoid detection. The Galactic Assembly would never do this. They fought with honor, with flashing lights and proud broadcasts of their intentions. They announced their presence and fought fair. That was why they were losing. Humans had learned a different way. All ships, this is Soman, weapons free. Remember, hit hard, hit fast, and get out. No heroics. If we die here, we can't complete the mission. 4 human ships dropped their stealth fields simultaneously before the Devourers could react. Magnetic accelerator cannons opened fire. The weapons were primitive by galactic standards, just metal slugs launched at incredible speeds by electromagnetic force. No energy signature to adapt to, no shields to bypass, just raw kinetic force. The first Devourer escort exploded as a tungsten penetrator rod punched through its hull at 40 km per second. The second took 3 hits and split in half. The third managed to raise its shields, but the shields were designed for energy weapons. Solid projectiles passed through them like they weren't there. Target the Harvester's main power core, Soman ordered. Full salvo. Every gun on every human ship fired at once. The Harvester's armor was thick, designed to resist incredible punishment, but it couldn't adapt to unpredictable kinetic weapons. Each ship attacked from a different angle with different ammunition. Some used armor-piercing rounds, others used explosive shells. The Harvester's defensive systems couldn't adjust fast enough. Something critical broke inside the massive ship. Secondary explosions rippled across its hull. The Harvester began to break apart. All ships jumped now, Soman commanded. The human vessels vanished into faster-than-light travel, leaving nothing but debris and confused Devourer response teams behind. In her laboratory on Europa, Murray stared at lines of code scrolling across her screen. She had been awake for 36 hours straight, living on stimulants and determination. Her eyes burned and her hands shook, but she couldn't stop now. She was so close. The Devourers used a hive mind communication system. Every ship, every drone, every weapon platform was connected through quantum encrypted channels, the assembly's best. Hackers had tried to break it for weeks. They failed because they tried to fight advanced technology with more advanced technology. Murray had a different approach. She didn't try to break the encryption. She tried to speak the Devourers' language. She had studied their code patterns from captured drones. The Devourers were machines, but they were also ancient. Their programming had layers built over thousands of years. Deep down, underneath all the modern encryption was old code, simple code. Code from when they were first built. Murray found a vulnerability, a tiny flaw, in how the Devourers processed certain data packets. If she could inject malicious code disguised as routine status updates, she might be able to cause errors in their targeting systems. It won't shut them down, she muttered to herself, typing frantically, but it might buy us seconds. In combat, seconds matter. She packaged her virus into a transmission probe and sent it to Admiral Hyan's command center. Field test this at the next engagement, she wrote in her report. Plant it on any damaged Devourer vessel, let it spread through their network. Results should be apparent within hours. 3 days later, pilot Hana sat in her fighter cockpit, waiting for the launch order. Her squadron consisted of 12 light attack craft, small and fast. Each fighter carried a single nuclear warhead modified for maximum yield. It was a suicide mission, and everyone knew it. All pilots, this is mission control. The voice crackled in her helmet. Target is confirmed, Devourer capital. Ship Theta 9, it's coordinating the attack on the Meridian system. Take it out and their entire fleet loses cohesion. Hana checked her instruments one last time. Copy that, control, squadron sound. Off. One by one, her pilots confirmed they were ready. Hana knew most of them personally. They had trained together, joked together, dreamed together about seeing Earth restored. Some of them wouldn't come back from this. Launch in 3, 2, 1, go. 12 fighters shot from the carrier bay. Accelerating to maximum speed, they flew in spread formation, making themselves harder to target. The Devourer capital ship was massive, 10 km long and bristling with weapons. Its escorts opened fire immediately. Evasive maneuvers, Hana shouted. Don't fly straight. Fighters jinked and rolled as enemy fire filled space around them. One of Hana's pilots took a direct hit and vanished in a ball of fire. Another lost his engine and had to abort. The remaining 10 pushed forward. Deploy Murray Surprise, Hana ordered. One fighter launched a data probe at a damaged Devourer escort. The probe latched onto the hull and began broadcasting Murray's virus. Within seconds, the Devourer escort's weapons went offline for a 3-second cycle. It wasn't much, but it created a gap through the hole. Now the fighters screamed through the opening. Devourer point defense systems tracked them, firing thousands of rounds per second. 2 more fighters exploded. Hana's cockpit shook as fragments tore through her right wing, but her fighter held together. We're in close, arming warheads. The remaining fighters dove toward the capital ship's center section. Hana could see the massive power core. Through gaps in the armor, it pulsed with energy, feeding the ship's weapons and shields. On my mark, release payloads and break away. 3, 2, 1. Mark. 8 nuclear warheads dropped from the fighters and ignited their thrusters, diving into the Devourer capital ship's core. The human pilots pulled up hard, engines screaming. Hana's fighter cleared the blast radius by less than 200 m. Behind her, 8 nuclear explosions went off simultaneously inside the Devourer ship's most vulnerable point. The capital ship didn't just explode, it disintegrated. The shockwave caught one more fighter, killing the pilot instantly. 7 fighters out of 12 made it back to the carrier. Hana climbed out of her cockpit on shaking legs. Her crew chief grabbed her in a fierce hug. You crazy, wonderful pilots, the chief said, voice thick with emotion. You did it. The Devourer fleet in Meridian is in chaos. Hana nodded, too exhausted to speak. She thought about the 5 pilots who didn't make it back. They had families on Titan, on Europa, on the asteroid colonies. Those families would grieve, but they would also know their loved ones had mattered. They had struck a blow that the mighty Galactic Assembly couldn't. Across the galaxy, the Devourers were starting to notice something strange. Ships were being destroyed in ways they couldn't predict or adapt to. Their communication network was experiencing errors. Targets they thought were destroyed kept attacking from unexpected angles. In the Galactic Assembly's war room, analysts were equally confused. We're detecting unusual energy signatures at Devourer-controlled systems, one analyst reported. Nuclear detonations, kinetic impacts. Someone is attacking them, but we can't identify who. Pirates, someone suggested. No pirate has this kind of capability. These are coordinated military strikes. Could it be a rival machine? Intelligence. Captain Tejo sat in the back of the room listening. He knew the truth, but he said nothing. The assembly had refused to listen to him before. Let them figure it out on their own. He just hoped they figured it out before it was too late. Meanwhile, Commander Soman was already planning her next raid. Admiral Hyun was deploying more stealth frigates. Mura was refining her virus. Hana and her surviving pilots were back in training, preparing for the next mission. The galaxy still didn't know humanity had entered the war. The ghosts were fighting in the void, invisible and deadly. They struck without warning, vanished without trace, and left the devourers confused and bleeding. Commander Yuna stood in the command center watching reports flow in from a dozen operations. They were winning small victories, saving thousands of lives the assembly would never know about, but she knew it couldn't last. Eventually, they would have to reveal themselves. The question was when and how. Admiral Hyun, she said quietly, I think it's almost time to show our hand. Hyun nodded. I agree. The assembly is planning a last stand at Arcturus Gate, 3,000 ships against 10,000 devourers. They're going to lose. Unless we help them. Unless we help them openly, where everyone can see. Yuna smiled grimly. Then let's prepare for the galaxy to meet humanity one more time. Fleet Admiral Dehyun stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, humanity's largest warship. Through the viewscreen he watched the Arcturus Gate, a massive energy barrier that protected the gateway to the assembly's core worlds. Beyond that gate lay the richest, most populated systems in the galaxy. If the devourers broke through, billions would die. Status report, Dehyun said calmly. 500 human vessels in position, his tactical officer replied. We're holding in stealth mode 2 million kilometers from the assembly fleet. The devourers will arrive in approximately 40 minutes. Dehyun was 60 years old, born on Titan. Long after Earth fell, he had never seen his ancestral home world except through telescopes. His entire life had been preparation for this moment. 300 years of human history, survival, and sacrifice had led to right now. Good. We wait for the assembly to engage. First, when their line starts to break, we drop stealth and hit the devourers from their flank. We only get one chance to make an impression. Let's make it count. On the other side of the battlefield, Captain Tejo stood on the bridge of a new ship. After his last encounter with the Assembly Council, he had requested transfer to a frontline vessel. If he was going to die fighting the devourers, he would do it with honor. His new ship, the Courage, was part of the Assembly's defensive line. Captain were receiving updated fleet positions. His communications officer said, 3,000 Assembly vessels. We're holding at the gate. Command says this is our last stand. Tejo looked around at his crew. They were scared but determined. These people trusted him to lead them through the coming battle. He wouldn't let them down. All hands, this is the captain. In a few minutes, we face the greatest threat our galaxy has ever known. The devourers want to erase everything we've built, everything we love. We're not going to let that happen. We stand here together and we fight for our families, for our future, for everyone who can't fight for themselves. His crew responded with determination in their eyes. Whatever happened, they would face it together. The Devourers arrived like a storm. 10,000 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. They were black against the stars, their hulls covered in weapons and armor that had adapted to every attack the assembly had thrown at them. They moved forward relentlessly like a wall of death. All ships opened fire, the assembly commander broadcast. 3,000 ships unleashed everything they had: energy beams, particle cannons, quantum torpedoes, the most advanced weapons. The galaxy lit up space. The Devourers' shields absorbed most of it. Their adaptive armor handled the rest. Few ships took damage, but the vast majority kept coming. The Devourers returned fire. Their kinetic weapons and exotic matter cannons tore through assembly shields like paper. Ships exploded. The defensive formation started to crumble. Tejo gripped his command chair as the courage shook under enemy fire. Return fire. Target the nearest capital ship. His weapons officer shook her head helplessly. Our shots aren't penetrating, sir. Their armor is too thick. Keep firing. Anyway, we have to hold the line. But the line wasn't holding. Tejo could see it on his tactical display. Assembly ships were being destroyed faster than they could react. In 10 minutes, they had lost 400 vessels. In 20 minutes, it was 800. The Devourers kept pushing forward, unstoppable and uncaring. Captain, the flagship is ordering full retreat, communications reported. We're evacuating to the inner defensive positions. Tejo felt despair wash over him. They had failed. The gate would fall. The core worlds would be destroyed. Everything was lost. Then something impossible happened. Captain, I'm detecting new contacts. The sensor officer shouted. Ships decloaking behind the Devourer fleet. Hundreds of them. Tejo stared at his screen. 500 vessels had appeared out of nowhere, moving in perfect attack formation. They were using designs he had never seen before. Angular, efficient, built for war. And then he saw the markings on their hulls, a symbol of Earth, the blue planet that humanity had lost 3 centuries ago. It's them, Tejo whispered. The humans. They came. Admiral Dehyun's voice cut across all frequencies, broadcasting to both the assembly fleet and the Devourers. His tone was hard as steel. Attention all vessels, this is Fleet Admiral Dehyun of the Human Defense Fleet. For 300 years, the galaxy counted us as a lost cause. You were wrong. Humanity survived. And we're done hiding. Devourers, you picked the wrong galaxy to invade. All human ships weapons free. Show them what we learned in the dark. The human fleet opened fire. Magnetic accelerator cannons launched solid projectiles at speeds the Devourers couldn't track. Nuclear missiles, the oldest and simplest weapons in humanity's arsenal, streaked toward their targets. These weren't sophisticated quantum weapons or energy beams. They were brutal, straightforward, and the Devourers had no defense against them. The first wave of attacks caught the Devourers completely by surprise. 100 ships exploded in the opening salvo. The Devourer fleet tried to adapt, tried to adjust their armor and shields, but human weapons were too varied. Every ship used different tactics. Some fired armor-piercing rounds, others used explosive shells, a few launched electromagnetic pulse weapons that scrambled Devourer systems, and then Myri's virus activated across the Devourer network, suddenly targeting systems failed. Weapons locked up for crucial seconds, communication between ships became garbled, the perfect, coordinated Devourer fleet started. Making mistakes, now Dehian ordered. All ships attack pattern Omega, break their formation. The human fleet split into dozens of smaller groups, each attacking from different angles. They didn't try to hold a neat line like the assembly. They fought like wolves, darting in and out, hitting weak points and vulnerable systems. Lieutenant Gina led her Marine boarding team onto a damaged Devourer cruiser. They wore heavy armor and carried weapons designed for close combat. Their mission was simple but deadly: plant explosive charges in the ship's core and get out before it blew. Move fast, Gina shouted as they fought through corridors filled with defensive drones. We have 3 minutes. Her team moved like clockwork. They had trained for this scenario hundreds of times. They knew every weak point in Devourer ship design. Human intelligence had studied captured vessels for weeks, finding vulnerabilities. They reached the core chamber. Gina personally placed the charges while her team held off attacking drones. Charges set, fall back. The Marines ran for their extraction point. Behind them, explosions tore through the ship. They reached their boarding craft with seconds to spare, the ship collapsing around them. Extraction successful, Gina reported. Target destroyed, moving to next objective. Back in the main battle, the tide was turning. The assembly fleet, seeing the humans fight, found new courage. They stopped retreating and pushed forward. Combined human and assembly forces smashed into the Devourer fleet from multiple directions. Captain Tejo watched in awe as human ships danced through the battlefield. They were outgunned and outnumbered, but they fought with a ferocity he had never seen. Every move was calculated, every attack served a purpose. This wasn't just combat, it was art. Captain, we're receiving tactical data from the human fleet, his communications officer said in wonder. They're sharing targeting information. Weak points, attack patterns, they're helping us fight more effectively. Use it, Tejo ordered. Target the coordinates they're sending us. The Courage fired at a Devourer ship's exposed power conduit. The shot connected perfectly, and the enemy vessel went dark. Across the battlefield, assembly ships were having similar success using human intelligence. Admiral Dehian watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. Devourers were powerful, but they were also predictable. They relied on superior technology and adaptation. Humanity had learned to fight without relying on any single advantage. They used every trick, every weapon, every tactic their ancestors had developed through thousands of years of warfare. Sir, enemy fleet is breaking formation, his tactical officer reported. They're attempting to retreat. Don't let them regroup. All ships pursuit course, hit them while they're vulnerable. The human fleet pressed the attack. Devourer ships were destroyed by the dozens. What had been an organized invasion force became a chaotic retreat. When the battle finally ended, 5,000 Devourer ships had been destroyed. The remaining 5,000 fled into deep space. The assembly had lost 1,000 ships, but they had held the line. The gate remained secure. In the aftermath, Captain Tejo's ship drifted near the Indomitable. He requested a direct communication channel with Admiral Dehian, the human admiral's face appeared on screen. He looked tired but unbowed. Captain Tejo, we meet again. Admiral, I thank you, you saved us. All. Dehyun shook his head. We saved ourselves, the Devourers. Wouldn't have stopped with the assembly. Eventually, they would have found us. 2. We just decided to fight on our terms, not theirs. The assembly will want to talk to you. Officially. I'm sure they will. Tell them we're ready. We're not hiding anymore, for better or worse, humanity is back. Tejo looked at the human admiral with deep respect. 300 years ago, humanity had been on the edge of extinction, a failed species. Now they were the ones who had saved the galaxy. The assembly had counted mankind as a lost tale. They were wrong. Humanity had become a legend. Commander Yuna walked through the halls of the Galactic Assembly for the first time in her life. The building was beautiful, all sweeping curves and crystal windows that caught the light of 3 suns. It was built to inspire awe, to remind everyone who entered that they stood in the center of galactic civilization. She was not impressed. Yuna wore her military uniform, the same black and gray that human soldiers had worn in the Battle of Arcturus Gate. Behind her walked Admiral Hyun and Captain Tejo. The Valorian captain had volunteered to escort them to help bridge the gap between humanity and the assembly. They're nervous, Tejo said quietly as they passed groups of alien dignitaries. They don't know what to make of you. Good, Yuna replied, let them be. Nervous. For 300 years. They wrote us off as dead primitives. Now they need us. A little nervousness is appropriate. They entered the Great Council chamber. The 7 representatives of the ascended world sat in their elevated seats looking down at the floor where Yuna and her companions stood. High Chancellor Vexter spoke first. Commander Yuna, Admiral Hyun on behalf of the Galactic Assembly. I welcome you. We are pleased to discover that humanity survived. Yuna kept her expression neutral. Are you? 3 months ago, Captain Tejo tried to tell you about us. You laughed at him. You dismissed humanity as too primitive to matter. The chamber fell silent. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. That was a mistake, Vexter admitted. We were wrong about your people. Your intervention at Arcturus Gate saved billions of lives. The assembly is grateful. We didn't do it for gratitude, Yuna said. We did it because it was right. Because watching innocent people die when we could help would have made us monsters. Our ancestors made that mistake once. We won't repeat it. Regardless of your motivations, the result is clear. Humanity has proven itself. We would like to formally invite you to join the Galactic Assembly as the 8th member world. Yuna exchanged glances with Admiral Hyun. They had discussed this moment many times. We accept your invitation with conditions. Conditions. A council member from the Thaxian delegation sounded offended. You're in no position to make demands. Aren't we? Yuna's voice was hard. The Devourers are still out there. They've retreated, but they're not defeated. You need our weapons, our tactics, our experience. So yes, we have conditions. Vexter raised a hand to quiet the other council members. Speak your terms. First, Earth's restoration begins immediately. We want resources, technology, and support to clean our home world and make it livable again. Second Human Military Command remains. Independent, we'll coordinate with assembly forces, but we won't be absorbed into your structure. We fight our way. Third, you help us bring our people home. Millions of humans have lived their entire lives on cold moons and asteroids. They deserve to see their ancestral home. The council members whispered among themselves. Finally, Vexter nodded. Your terms are acceptable. Welcome to the Assembly, Humanity. The formal ceremony lasted for hours. Treaties were signed, speeches were made. Yuna endured it all with patience, thinking about what came next. The real work was just beginning. 2 weeks later, Engineer Siak stood in an assembly shipyard surrounded by alien engineers and designers. They were studying human ship construction techniques with fascination and confusion. I don't understand, a Valorian engineer said, examining schematics. Your fusion drives are so much simpler than ours. They use basic magnetic containment. How can they be so efficient? Siak smiled. Because simple means fewer things can break. Your drives are more powerful, yes, but they require exotic matter and quantum stabilizers. Ours just need hydrogen and strong magnets. When you're fighting a war, reliability beats sophistication. And these weapons, magnetic accelerators, we abandoned this technology centuries ago. Another mistake, Siak said. You moved on to energy weapons because they seemed more advanced, but kinetic weapons have advantages. No energy signature to track, no shields can stop them, and the Devourers can't adapt to them because there's nothing to adapt to. It's just physics, mass times velocity equals destruction. The Valorian engineer nodded slowly. You've been preparing for war for 300 years. You learned to fight with whatever worked, not whatever was fashionable. Exactly. Now let me show you how to build these. The assembly needs to diversify its weapons. The Devourers will come back, and next time they'll be ready for pure energy attacks. But if we hit them with energy weapons and kinetic weapons and nuclear weapons and cyber attacks, they won't be able to adapt fast enough. Across the galaxy, joint human assembly task forces were being formed. Admiral Hyan took command of one such fleet, working alongside a Valorian admiral named Kexvar. Their mission was to hunt down remaining Devourer forces before they could regroup. Your people fight strangely, Kexvar commented as they reviewed battle plans. No formation discipline. Ships operating independently, it seems. Chaotic. It is chaotic, Yuna agreed. That's the point. The Devourers are machines. They think in patterns, in logic. Chaos confuses them. Every human ship captain is trained to think independently, to adapt and improvise. No two of our attacks are ever the same. But how do you maintain coordination? Trust, training, and accepting that sometimes people will make mistakes. A rigid formation is easy to predict, and counter. A fluid adaptive force is much harder to fight. Kexvar studied the human admiral with new respect. We have much to learn from you, and we have much to learn from you. Hyan replied, your shield technology is decades ahead of ours. Your sensor arrays are incredible. If we combine our strengths, your technology, and our tactics, we can build something the Devourers can't defeat. On Titan, pilot Hana was training a new generation of fighter pilots, Half of them were human, half were aliens from assembly worlds, volunteers who wanted to learn human combat techniques. Rule 1, Hana told the assembled pilots: forget everything you learned about honorable combat. The Devourers don't care about honor, they care about winning, so we fight to win using whatever works. A young Thaxian pilot raised his hand. But isn't it cowardly to use stealth and ambush tactics? Hana fixed him with a hard stare. Is it cowardly to stay alive, to protect your friends? I lost 5 good pilots at the Battle of Meriden. They died because we needed to destroy a Devourer capital ship, and the only way to do it was a near-suicide run. They weren't cowards. They were heroes who understood that survival means more than pride. The pilot lowered his hand, chastened. Now let's talk about improvisation. Hana continued, your flight plans will never survive contact with the enemy. You need to learn to adapt, to think, to react. That's what keeps you alive. Meanwhile, on Earth, the first restoration teams were landing. Commander Yuna stood in what had once been a city, now just ruins covered in 300 years of decay. Radiation levels were still high, but falling. The planet was healing. Slowly. Beside her, Admiral Dehayan looked at the broken buildings with sadness. Our ancestors did this. They destroyed paradise because they couldn't learn to share it. But their children learned, Yuna said. We survived because we learned to work together. Humans from every nation, every background, every belief. We had to cooperate or die. The colonies on Titan, Europa, the asteroids, they succeeded because we left old hatreds behind. Think we can teach that to the rest of the galaxy? We're already starting to. Look. She pointed to a restoration crew working nearby. Humans and aliens worked side by side, clearing rubble and planting the first new trees. A human engineer showed a Valorian how to use decontamination equipment. A Thaxian scientist shared atmospheric data with a human climatologist. This is what we fought for, Yuna said. Not just survival, not just victory. This. Different people working together towards something better. 6 months after the Battle of Arcturus Gate, a joint task force cornered the last major Devourer fleet. The battle was fierce but brief. Human weapons and tactics combined with assembly technology proved too much for the machine intelligence. The Devourers were pushed back to their origin point and sealed there with energy barriers they couldn't break. The galaxy was safe for now. On the anniversary of humanity's revelation to the galaxy, a ceremony was held on Earth. Leaders from all 8 member worlds gathered in what would become humanity's new capital city, built on the ruins of the old. Captain Teho attended as an honored guest. He stood with Commander Yuna and Admiral Hyan, watching as the first generation of children born after Earth's restoration played in clean parks under a healing sky. A year ago, the galaxy thought you were extinct, Teho said. Now you're heroes. How does it feel? Yuna smiled slightly. Strange. We didn't do it to be heroes. We did it because it needed to be done. But I suppose that's what heroism really is, doing what's necessary even when it's hard. Your people have changed the galaxy, Teho said, not just militarily. You've reminded us all what we'd forgotten. That survival isn't about having the best technology or the strongest Weapons. It's about resilience, adaptation, the will to keep fighting when everything seems lost. Admiral Hyan nodded. For 300 years we lived in the dark. We made do with less. We learned to be creative, to be tough, to never give up. Those lessons saved us. Now maybe they can save everyone. Above them, ships from 8 different worlds flew in formation, a symbol of the new unity. Human vessels flew alongside Valorian and Thaxian ships, no longer separated by suspicion and old assumptions. The galaxy had counted mankind as a lost tale, a warning about the dangers of self-destruction. But humanity had transformed that tale into something else, a story about second chances, about learning from mistakes, about rising from ashes. Stronger than before, they had rushed into the fight when no one expected them. They had proven that being written off as dead didn't mean staying that way. And now, as Earth's sky turned blue again and life returned to a dead world, humanity stood ready to help build a galaxy worth defending. The lost tale had become a living legend, and the story was just beginning.